We're about to get into a really powerful and, honestly, a tragic story from the very start of the Kargil War. All right, picture this. It's June 9th, 1999. There's this heavy, eerie quiet hanging over an army base camp in Kargil. Something just feels off. For 22 long, agonizing days, everyone has been waiting, and then the Pakistani army hands over the bodies of 6 Indian soldiers. But when those coffins are opened, what they find inside horrifies even the most hardened, seasoned officers. The state of those soldiers, especially one young 22-year-old captain named Saurabh Kalia, it brings up a single horrifying question. And to get to the bottom of it, we have to rewind the clock. So let's set the stage, right? To really get what happened here, you have to understand the bigger picture. We're in early 1999, and believe it or not, on the surface, it actually looked like peace was on the horizon. And this is where the story gets a real twist of tragic irony. You've got leaders shaking hands, signing the Lahore Declaration, opening new bus routes. There's this genuine feeling of hope. But behind that public show of peace, a secret betrayal was already underway. General Pervez Musharraf had secretly kicked off Operation Badr. You see, for years, there was this kind of fragile trust up in those insanely high-altitude posts. It was based on what they called a gentleman's agreement, basically an unwritten rule. Both sides would pull back during the brutal winter to avoid the cold, then come back after the snow melted. India always held up its end of the deal. But Pakistan, they broke that trust. They used that brutal winter as a perfect cover. While Indian posts were empty, their soldiers, the Northern Light Infantry, and other militants crossed the line of control. They took over India's own posts, key peaks like Tiger Hill and Tallowing. Suddenly, they had this massive tactical advantage, literally looking down on Indian territory from 16,000 feet. So here's the crucial thing to grasp. The enemy was now dug in, deep inside Indian territory, and the Indian army had no idea. The first inkling that something was wrong, it didn't come from high-tech satellites or spies. It came from a local shepherd. Think about this. On May 3rd, 1999, a man named Tashi Namgyal is just out looking for his lost yak. And up there, he spots these armed strangers digging bunkers. This wasn't something you see every day. He immediately reported it. And that right there, that was the very first piece of intel in what would become the Kargil War. At first, the Indian command, well, they kind of shrugged it off. They thought, oh, it's probably just a small group of militants. They had no idea it was the actual Pakistani regular army. It's a textbook case of what military folks call the fog of war, that complete uncertainty you face in the beginning of a conflict. And in this case, it was a tragic miscalculation. But pretty soon, the evidence started piling up. Indian patrols sent to check things out were met with incredibly heavy fire. Then, reconnaissance helicopters were getting shot at by anti-aircraft guns. That's not something militants usually have. The horrifying reality started to dawn on them. This wasn't just a few infiltrators. This was a well-armed professional army. This was an invasion. Okay, so the high command is scrambling. They desperately need to know what's going on. They need eyes on the ground, specifically at a key spot called Bajring Post. And this incredibly important mission, it falls to a very young officer who's actually on his very first field posting. His name was Captain Saurabh Kalia, and he was just 22 years old. I mean, think about that. Fresh out of the academy. His job was simple. Lead a small patrol, see what's going on, and report back. This was supposed to be a recon mission, not an all-out battle. So, on May 15th, Captain Kalia and his 5 men, Sepoy Arjun Ram, Sepoy Banwarlal Bagaria, Sepoy Bikaram, Sepoy Mularam, and Sepoy Naresh Singh, they start their climb up into these icy, unforgiving peaks, and they have absolutely no idea. They are walking straight into a trap. What they walked into is what the military calls a kill zone. It was a perfectly set up U-shaped ambush. They were totally exposed, trapped in the low ground with hundreds of Pakistani soldiers positioned above them on the heights. It was the worst possible situation to be in. And even with those impossible odds, they didn't surrender. Captain Kalia ordered them to fight back. And for hours, get this, 6 Indian soldiers held off hundreds, just 6 of them. But in the end, their ammunition ran out. The weather was so bad that no backup could reach them. They were out of bullets, overwhelmed, and captured alive. Now, this is where the story takes a truly dark turn.
The men were dragged across the line of control. As soldiers, they would have expected to be treated as prisoners of war, under the rules of the Geneva Convention. But what happened next, it wasn't war. It was a descent into pure hell.
For 22 days. For 22 days, Captain Kalia and his men endured the most brutal, inhuman torture you can imagine. This wasn't just random cruelty. It was systematic. It was designed to break them, to force them to give up military secrets. I'm not going to get too graphic, but the post-mortem reports are just horrifying. Their eardrums were pierced with hot rods, eyes gouged out, bones broken. But here's the part that gives you chills. Through all of that unimaginable pain, they broke the bodies, but they could not break their spirit. Not one of them gave up a single piece of information, not one. So we come back to June 9th, when their mutilated bodies were finally returned. And as the news of what had been done to them spread like wildfire across India, everything changed. The very nature of the Kargil conflict shifted overnight.
This wasn't just about evicting infiltrators anymore. No way. This became a war of national pride. It was fueled by this righteous, furious anger. It became a promise across the entire nation to avenge these 6 soldiers.
And the Indian Army responded with something called Operation Vijay. They went in with this ferocious resolve. Every soldier fighting was fueled by the memory of what happened to Captain Kalia and his men. And one by one, they took back those peaks. The bloody battle for Tonaling, the famous assault on Tiger Hill, they took it all back.
There's a saying that high-altitude warfare isn't just a battle of weapons. It's the ultimate test of mental and psychological endurance. And the story of Captain Sohrab Kalia is maybe the most powerful reminder of that truth you'll ever hear. He and his men, they didn't just face enemy bullets. They faced the absolute worst of humanity, and they endured it for their country.
He was 22, an age when most of us are just figuring out our lives, just starting to dream. And at that age, Captain Kalia became this eternal symbol of valor. His story really makes you think, doesn't it? It leaves you with this deep question: what's the line between a soldier and a martyr? And where does that kind of courage even come from when you're staring absolute evil right in the face?